Today in America, economic inequality is a major problem. The rich are becoming richer and the poor even poorer. But it hasn't always been like this. The fight for economic equality is as old as America itself. People came here to create a life of freedom and liberty for all. After World War II, American incomes grew quickly and relatively equally. Life was good. But starting in the late 1970s, things began to change. These changes were no accident. They were due to intentional government and corporate decisions and laws on taxes, education, trade, labor, and financial regulation, which moved power away from low and moderate income American families and towards the wealthy. A Harvard business professor and economist asked more than 5,000 Americans how they thought wealth was distributed in the United States. 9 out of 10 of them said this was the most ideal distribution. They then described how they think it actually is, which is quite different from their ideal. Here is the actual distribution of wealth. I find it very disturbing that the top 20% have over 50% of the wealth, while the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. The top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 of Americans. If this is difficult to understand, let's look at this another way. Here is the population of the USA, with the poorest people on the left and the wealthiest on the right. The total wealth of the United States was $54 trillion in 2009. This is what it looks like if we share it equally among the population. So to let the American dream work, we need to have an incentive to work and become wealthy. So an ideal would be the wealthiest folk are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans, but even the poor folk aren't actually poor since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. 9 out of 10 people said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty good. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality here, is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register, and the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart, and the top 1%, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher. He has a whole new column of his own because he won't fit on the chart. In 1976, the richest 1% took home only 9%. Their share of income has tripled in the last 30 years. Do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We need to wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not all what we think it is. Here's an even better way of looking at the issue.
So it's actually 9 pieces of pie.
Wow.
Yeah. 90% of the wealth is right here in the top.
That's terrible.
Now, the upper middle class and the middle class, they share 1 piece. So these guys, they've got about 80% of a piece. They get 20% of a piece. And then the lower middle class, they've got 0.3% of a piece. Yeah, they have some crumbs there. There you go. That's what they get. And the poorest, they have no pie. In fact, they have less than no pie. They actually have a bill for pie. They're in pie debt. They owe pie.
People in the poorest 20% are, on average, more than $6,000 in debt.
But what can we do to close the gap and create a more equal economy? Raising the minimum wage is a critical first step. Many working families struggle to make ends meet despite working full-time. A higher minimum wage and a social safety net like unemployment benefits can lift millions out of poverty and provide economic security. Education regarding finances can empower individuals with the knowledge to build wealth, save, and invest wisely, giving everyone the tools to thrive. Improving access to quality education and vocational training helps people of all backgrounds pursue opportunities that lead to better paying jobs and careers. Universal access to affordable health care reduces the financial burden on low-income families and increases their chance for economic mobility. Supporting progressive tax policies that ensure the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share can help fund these initiatives and level the playing field. True economic inequality is possible when we invest in people, expand opportunities, and ensure fairness in the system. By working together, we can create a future where prosperity is shared by all. Countries with higher levels of economic equality often experience better social outcomes, including lower crime rates and improved education. Together, we can fix the inequality that divides us. It's time to take action for a fairer, more just economy.